Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Oonie Talks Show. What's up, guys? Oonie here, and on this episode, we are talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4. Just finished up last week, so we're gonna talk about it. Right off the bat, I've gotta say, this season, hands down, the best season of the entire series. In my personal opinion, they did a lot of really cool, really good stuff. And I thought it was pretty interesting that they took this season and split it into three sort of sub-arcs, right? You got Ghost Rider and Darkhold in the first section. Then you got Ada and the other LMDs, still with the Darkhold in play. And then you have the framework, where everyone's an agent of Hydra. Like, what? Really interesting dynamic they took this time around. So, to start off the Ghost Rider arc with the Darkhold, man, when they first gave that kind of hint announcement that they would be bringing Ghost Rider in, they had that teaser poster with the fire chain going across the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. logo. I was a bit skeptical. I was in that kind of bandwagon of people that was like, oh, okay, they're gonna bring this kind of weird, kind of out there character into this show that's been kind of progressing towards it, but are they really ready for this kind of superpowered force that is pretty popular in the comics and is, well, in general, a pretty popular character? They're gonna bring him into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Like, what? And we all knew that at the end of season 3, they were teasing the LMD, life model decoys. So it was to everyone thinking, like, okay, how are they going to merge these two? And I gotta say, after looking back on all that throughout the end of season 4 now, they did a pretty darn good job in terms of having all those coincide together, right? It was like, how are they going to fit life model decoys and Ghost Rider together? But this whole idea of them splitting up into different arcs, but then having them all come back together in this finale, you had essences of Ghost Rider, he came back for the finale. You have Life Model Decoys, the one that was still pretty much the plot point that stayed throughout the entire season. You got Ada, who was created back at the end of season 3. She ended up becoming the most controversial character throughout this entire season, and wanting to become human and ultimately becoming the villain of this season. Ghost Rider and the Darkhold, man, the Darkhold just literally comes out of nowhere. You have this mystical force that's playing with all these essentially ghosts, spirits trying to come back to life. And then you have Robbie Reyes' uncle, who basically wants to become a god, so he uses the Darkhold to get all these powers, create matter. And then on top of that, you got S.H.I.E.L.D. with their own problems, having to deal with inhuman threats. And then, oh my gosh, I even forgot, Daisy was rogue at the beginning of the season. And you had the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Mace. There was a lot riding on the beginning of the season that they had to set up. And in all honesty, looking back, they did a really good job. So then they moved into the next arc after Ghost Rider, when Ghost Rider took his uncle back to the depths of hell, which is a relative term as we have now learned. And we have the LMD life model decoy arc, where Radcliffe, he's kind of evil, but he just wants to make the world better by creating the framework. In all honesty, this arc kind of caught me by surprise. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, because I knew they had just kind of finished off the Ghost Rider thing, but I wasn't quite sure where they were going to go. But once they started to plant these seeds that, okay, this is the real part where we start getting into life model decoys and what they really can do. And that was some creepy stuff, right? You had the life model decoy of May, ended up having life model decoys of almost everyone by the end. Like, who do you trust? That whole game of essentially almost a witch hunt, because you got these robots that are running the show. You don't know who to trust. You don't know if you yourself might even be a life model decoy, and you might not even know it. Crazy and creepy. That's all I can say. Then you have the framework. Everyone is an agent of Hydra. Now, I know a lot of people are saying this is some pseudo Matrix and saying it's a really big ripoff and it's really done poorly, but I really think you just need to know the context, because within the show, it totally makes sense. You have this world that's turned upside down from the real world, all because of these few choices that people made, or didn't make rather, in that instance. And it is a really interesting dynamic used, quite literally. As the episode was titled, it was an what-if scenario. So characters are alive, characters are not alive. A lot of characters were still alive. Like, I really like that. They had course, they had Ward, then they had Trip, and then they made mention of some of the heads of Hydra that were still alive in the universe that they killed off on the show. That was a pretty fun Easter egg. And it was also really cool to see where all the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ended up. You had Coulson as the teacher, you had Mac living with his daughter, then you had May, who was higher up in Hydra, then you have Fitz, who is pretty much the number 2 of Hydra, right next to Ada, who's posing as Madam Hydra. It makes total sense, but then it still throws you for a loop when they reveal it. But overall, that was really cool. It added a lot of depth to these characters, because even as they came out of the framework towards the end of the season, they said it's not exactly a dream, it was quite literally living another life. So it would be interesting to see if they pull parts from that going forward in the show. Also, another thing, when everyone was coming out of the framework, it was interesting to see how they came out and how they kind of reacted, because you had Coulson, who was like, okay, let's get this over with, I'm back in my own mind. He was probably the best one to come out first, because he had a little better grip on what was going on outside. But then you had May come through, and you had Fitz be thrown through by Radcliffe, which I think was a pretty awesome act. When Fitz came out, he was all completely feeling guilty and unsure of things that were going on. And then, of course, Ada comes in and swoops him away. And then you have Mac, who stays in with his daughter. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I thought that if they were, because there were those rumors of them possibly bringing back a former cast member or anything. In all honesty, I had my bets on if they were gonna bring anyone back, it would be Mac's daughter, because that might have been the way to get Mac to actually come back. But of course, in the end, man, that was a really sad ending. The part where Yo-Yo goes in to save Mac, but then she can't bring herself to force him through. So then they're sitting there at the end, and literally everything around them is erasing. And then, of course, tearjerker, man, tearjerker. So yes, overall, the season was very well put together. I've got to say, it surprised me in a lot of ways. Ada ended up being one of the craziest and most scariest villains by far. She was eerily just kind of there in the beginning, and then of course she had progression where she eventually became pretty much self-aware. She had her protocols kind of misconstrued, but she came to a logical conclusion, and then man, killing Radcliffe and then sending him into the framework for eternal jail pretty much. That was pretty brutal. But yeah, going back to Radcliffe, in all honesty, by the end I was feeling pretty bad for him. I mean, he got his love interest taken out in the real world and then in the framework as well. And of course, he's trapped in there on his own. All he wanted to do was just create a better world. And then Machines Rise Up, his own creation, pretty much killed him in the end. And when he was sitting on that beach, I don't know what it was, but the fact that he just disappeared and then that moment of silence, something in that scene really struck a chord. I was like, I really do feel sorry for him in the end, for all the bad stuff that he ended up doing, but he did a lot of good to sort of redeem himself by the end, so I thought he was pretty cool. Fitz this season was on fire. I mean, they've put him on a roller coaster ever since the beginning. The brain impairment thing back in season 2, and then they took Gemma away from him in season 3. It's like, what are they doing to this guy? But by this season, he's totally awesome, man. Coulson this season was pretty interesting because he had a lot of stuff that kind of came and went with him. Found out about his feelings for May, and that was kind of intertwined with her arc. But then you have them dealing with the life model decoy of May. And for both of them, you kind of see these feelings that are kind of revealed and all this other stuff going on. But then they planted this thing with the life model decoy May with the secret task of obtaining the Darkhold. But then she's embodied with all these memories, and she was programmed not to even notice that she was a life model decoy. So then you see she has the feelings of May for Coulson. And then, man, in that finale, Coulson taking in the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Rider. I'm anxious to see what the deal was that he made. Because, well, I'm just thinking there's going to be a lot of weird stuff going on in the next season. And then to wrap things up, you got Ghost Rider just heading off after they've destroyed Ada. They just burned her up to a crisp and literally just disintegrated her. Like, I don't know what's going on there. But then you have Ghost Rider going back to another dimension or whatever, and he pulls out his chain, and what does he do? He conjures a portal on his own with his chain, and it looks like Doctor Strange. I mean, come on, that's awesome. We're teasing this whole kind of other universes thing. It's all for it. Come on. They've gotten this far with all the weird stuff. Bring it on. But I have realized there are quite a few open ends they had with this season. I mean, of course, you got the thing with the deal with Coulson, but the two things that stuck out in my mind were, of course, the Superior, the Russian guy, who had basically been in the shadows the whole first half of the season, but then he came out as this guy who'd been intertwined with Coulson's past, and he really hated Inhumans and Coulson, and he wanted to kill them. But then, of course, he gets entangled with the LMDs, and he becomes an LMD himself. I mean, Ada chops off his head and basically gives him an infinite supply of body, which is really, really creepy. That was definitely one of the creepier parts of the season. But he's still out there. They left in their submarine, and they're still out there. So I wonder if they'll bring him back into the fold somewhere down the line. And then the other thing that really stuck out to me was the senator's brother, who they were hunting as an Inhuman, underwent Terrigenesis, and then he had those powers, but then he got shot by his own sister, and then she tossed him out the window into the sea, but then he went back into a cocoon, and they never picked up on that. I was expecting them to acknowledge that part by the end of the season, but nope, he's just out there. So I'm assuming they'll probably bring light to those two things. But I was kind of surprised they didn't address either of those by the end, right? They were just out there. So yeah, overall, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4 by far my favorite season, and I personally think it's the best so far. And we already know we're getting to Season 5, so that's going to be freaking awesome. We got Coulson up in space doing whatever. I'm really excited to see where they go with that. I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is getting bumped to a new time eventually because after the Inhumans show comes out, everyone's got like no idea where things are going next. So that'll be really interesting to see. I cannot wait. There's a lot of stuff I could keep rambling on about, but that's about all my mind can remember right now at this time. And judging by the timeline, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5 should be coming around the first Infinity War movie comes out, so it'll be interesting to see if they have any ties with that. So if they ended off the show after Season 5, in all honesty, I wouldn't be surprised, but hey, people were expecting it to be ended after this season, but clearly they've still got stories to tell, so I'm all for it. Thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Oonie Talk Show. What were your thoughts on this season overall? Do you still watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? I know a lot of people dropped off after a while, but in all honesty, if you are even remotely interested, you should definitely watch this season. It's a really good one. So drop down in the comments below with your thoughts, comments, and criticisms, and hop in on the discussion. I'd be glad to talk about things that maybe I didn't address in this episode. But with that said, I will catch you guys on the next episode of the Oonie Talks Show. So until then, see ya! Oonie